Hello, and welcome to Things We Said Today, our bi-weekly podcast about anything and everything to do with the Beatles, collectively and individually, past, present, sometimes even future. I'm Allan Kozinn, the author of The Beatles from the Cavern to the Rooftop, and Got That Something, How the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand Changed Everything, and co-author with Adrian Sinclair of the forthcoming McCartney Legacy series, Volume 1 due out in October. And a writer about music and musicians for the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and various other fine publications. I'm joined by my esteemed co-hosts, Ken Michaels, who you know is the host of the syndicated Beatles radio show Every Little Thing and a co-host of the solo Beatles podcast Talk More Talk. He also has his own YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio, even though it's on YouTube. There's a philosophical point here. And his own website, kenmichaelsradio.com, where he has tons of interviews on Beatles-related subjects. So Ken, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm looking forward to this interview that we're about to do.
Okay, and Darren DeVivo, a DJ at WFUV FM 90.7 in the New York area. He's been there since 1984 and still going strong. If you're not in the vicinity of New York, you can hear him and everything else at WFUV at WFUV.org. And he has other ways you can tune in too. So Darren, how's it going with you?
Things are good. Great to see you, Allan. Great to see you again, Ken. Hello, everyone out there in podcast land.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about new film, The Beatles in India, and we'll be having a chat with Pete Compton, one of the directors of the film. But first, of course, we have news, and Ken will give it to us.
Okay, thank you, Allan. It was big news for sure when it was announced last Friday that Paul McCartney will once again be starting another tour, which will be called the Got Back Tour. So far, he'll be touring North America beginning April 28th at the Spokane Arena, Spokane, Washington, and it'll be running through June 16th at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Altogether, and we don't know if any dates will be added, a total of 14 dates over roughly 6 weeks. There will be a pre-sale tomorrow. Now, we're recording this on February the 21st, so we're talking Tuesday, February 22nd. There'll actually be 2 pre-sales. There'll be one for American Express members at 10 a.m. local time, and then at 12 noon. Fans who have already signed up to the paulmccartney.com newsletter, they'll be getting an exclusive password ahead of the sale. And tickets to the general public will be made available this Friday, February 25th at 10 a.m. local time. It's also interesting to note that Paul's tour will overlap Ringo's tour a bit, and there are a few days when both Paul and Ringo are playing the same day here in the United States. So big news, following the pandemic, Paul, as promised, is back on the road. You guys want to say anything about that?
Is Glastonbury official yet?
I heard a report, and it was on a British TV show, that he's going to perform there, but I haven't seen an official word yet. But if that does happen, that usually happens in June, and I would figure it'll happen. Yeah, okay. So that'll be after Paul turns 80.
Yeah, a week.
And if he does do this, he'll be the oldest artist ever to headline Glastonbury.
Right.
Yeah. Who's
Darren?
the oldest right now? Do you know?
I don't know.
No?
I have no idea. We'll have to look that up.
All right. Well, I guess I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised by the announcement because we know that Paul loves to play live, loves to tour, and had been touring regularly up until, right before the pandemic. So I guess it's natural. It really isn't a surprise that now that the coast is somewhat clear, we hope, I don't know,
Yeah.
that Paul's looking to get back out there. Sorry, he's looking to got back out there, um, and tour again. My reaction actually was mixed to the announcement. I think I was happy to hear it because enough time now has gone by since I last saw Paul that I need my fix again. You could correct me if I'm wrong. Was it 2017? I think was the last time McCartney came through, or it might have been
2019.
Was it 2019? Come through the New York area. All right. I don't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning. So whatever. I think I'm ready to see a McCartney show. I was pretty excited at the early rumors that he would play Citi Field because, of course, that's the home of the Mets. But more importantly, when it comes to music, probably my favorite McCartney shows were the ones he did in 2009 at Citi Field. But he's at MetLife Stadium. Of course, I'm very concerned about can his voice hold up? You know, has there been some sort of, will his voice improve a bit with rest? I don't know if that's possible. He has been off the road for a while now. What about, maybe some exercises or coaching that he may or may not? He had plenty of time. We all did with the pandemic. So my reaction was mixed. I'm thrilled to get another opportunity to see him, but I'm concerned a bit about what it might sound like, what he might sound like. So I much would have preferred finding out that he's got a new album ready to go or something like that. But hey, and people are complaining on social media, mainly, I'm pretty much only on Facebook about the ticket prices. And it always seems like people start going at McCartney about the ticket prices. Look at the price to every other show, large scale concert out there. It's the age we live in. What are you going to do about the price of the ticket? But so, yeah, I mean, my reaction was mixed. My feelings are mixed, but I think when all is said and done, I'm happy he's healthy enough and feeling well enough and up to it and wants to play live. His show at MetLife Stadium, which right now is the last show of the tour, unless dates are added, will be 2 days before he turns 80.
Right.
And we'll have just seen, for those, well, in my case, those of us, and Ken, those of us in the New York area, will have just seen the 81-year-old Ringo earlier in the month at the Beacon Theater. So got to be thankful about that and not worry so much about, I guess, voice condition and ticket price.
Well, I pretty much agree with so much of what you just said there, Darren. I don't want to say I'm mixed because I'm just happy to see Paul doing something that he genuinely enjoys doing.
Yeah.
And it's in his blood. He loves to perform. He loves to entertain. He loves the feedback. And yeah, I'm concerned about his voice like a lot of fans are, but I don't know what he's done the last few years, if he's done anything to improve it.
I don't know if you can. Yeah, right.
Yeah, he doesn't really talk about that at all. But I think the most important thing is that he's living his life the way he wants to do it. And even though there's a part of me that is the very selfish part of me that would like to see him release as many studio albums as possible, in the last years of his life. And believe me, I hope he lives to be 200. But, I know that there's so many new Beatle fans out there, new McCartney fans that have never seen him live before. And he's doing a great service by staying out there. And I'll also be curious to find out, and I wouldn't be surprised if he keeps everything the same in terms of, he always gives you a close to a 3-hour concert. Can his body approaching 80 still be able to handle that? He's very proud of the fact that he gives you his money's worth. There's no crime if he scales it back a little bit, makes it 2.5 hours or even 2 hours. Who would blame him for that? But, if you're 30 years old and you're on stage. It's very demanding to give a 3-hour concert. But I'm curious to see, how his voice holds up. And, the most important thing to me is that he's really enjoying himself and being true to what he wants to do. Yeah, I'd love to have a new album every single year from him. But if it's important for him to be out there and to entertain people, and there's so many areas around the world where people have never seen him perform, somewhere he rarely ever goes to. A few years ago, he played Australia for the first time since the Wings days. Those people had to wait a long time, unless they flew to some other continent to see Paul perform. So I'm happy for Paul that he's doing this, and I'm happy for the fans that want to see him. And I'm always in the mood for a McCartney concert. So anyway, we shall see. More news. Ringo Starr's new book, Lifted, includes photos taken by fans and by him, with proceeds going to his charity, the Lotus Foundation. Ringo appeared on the Jimmy Kimmel Show last Thursday night. He was also on Australia's version of the Today Show to promote the book. And he also talked about the Get Back documentary. Ringo was very funny and in top form for both. Among the topics covered was how he came to write Octopus's Garden, the subject of farting, since there's a scene in Get Back where Ringo admits that he just let one go, and talking about a few specific photos from the new book he does as well, which you can purchase exclusively through juliansauctions.com. Jimmy Kimmel showed a photo of Ringo, wife Barbara, and Joe Walsh with his wife Marjorie having attended the Super Bowl. And Jimmy asked if Ringo was a Rams fan, and Ringo said yes when he's in LA. But he also has followed football here, and he says he's a Dallas Cowboys fan. And online, Ringo did post this photo online with the words, "We are the champions, go Rams go, peace and love." I would have preferred Ram on instead, but there you go. According to The Guardian, it's now reported that the Beatles' rooftop performance, first shown in IMAX theaters on the 53rd anniversary of its event, January 30th, followed by 3 days in IMAX theaters, February 11th, 12th, and 13th, is now being shown in conventional theaters in the UK, and that has already started since February 18th. I'm not sure if it's going to be anywhere else in the world. If any of our listeners know, if you're in the US and you know of the rooftop performance being shown in a regular theater, please let us know and we'll pass it along here on the show. George Harrison is on the front cover of Mojo magazine with the words, "The Quiet Beatles Fight to Be Heard." The issue also has a tribute to Ronnie Spector. Owen Lynn's new book, George Harrison in the 70s, comes out March the 24th. That's the official date for that. Owen's been a guest on my YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio, and also on Two Legs, the Paul McCartney podcast. And with special thanks to one of our listeners, JD Mack, we learned that the Fender Guitar Company is honoring George with the George Harrison Rosewood Telecaster. Based on the original Telecaster created for Harrison by Roger Rasmussen, this guitar remains true to its heritage with a classic look and retaining the unique tone only an all rosewood guitar can produce. The body is chambered for reduced weight and increased resonance. Other features include a rosewood neck with a laminated 9.5-inch radius rosewood fingerboard and a custom neck plate engraved with an symbol. Okay, another record store day is approaching, and we've got a few items to be announced for that day, which is April the 23rd. And there will be a 12-inch of Paul McCartney's song Women and Wives from his McCartney 3 album. On Dark Horse Records, the 1974 single for the Shanker Family and Friends, I Am Missing You, backed with Lust. That must be a 45. It actually says in the press release album, but that was released as a 45 in 74. That's what this must be. Plus on translucent vinyl, one in orange, one in blue, the Ringo the Fourth album from 1977, and I've heard only 1,000 copies have been made for each of the different colored vinyl versions there. A few more items here. You might be familiar with the organization called Theater Within. Every year since John Lennon's murder, they have put on Lennon tribute shows in New York City close to the anniversary of John's death. This year, they're actually announcing a Lennon and McCartney celebration featuring their first ever concert of the music of Paul McCartney to also celebrate his upcoming 80th birthday in June. Theater Within's concert will be the day after Paul's birthday, June 19th, which they will hold at the City Winery in New York. And their annual tribute to John, which is held at Symphony Space on Broadway and 95th Street, is being moved to October the 8th. In addition to these tribute concerts, Theater Within has provided over 500 free workshops in creative expression and mindfulness for children and teens and adults impacted by cancer. They also launched the John Lennon Real Love Project, a visionary songwriting program for public elementary schools. And finally, we'd like to wish, belatedly, a very happy birthday to Yoko Ono, who turned 89 last Friday. And don't forget, a new tribute CD has just come out on Yoko called Ocean Child, Songs of Yoko Ono, with various artists covering Yoko songs, and curated by Benjamin Gibbard of the band Death Cab for Cutie, which you have right there. Right on time, right on cue, Darren.
I just got it. So it's still in the plastic, so.
Okay.
There it is.
I've heard some of it on YouTube, and I will be getting a copy. It sounds really good.
Yeah,
I love the choice and selection of the songs there.
WFUV is playing David Byrne and Yola Tengo's version of Who Has Seen the Wind. And actually, there's so many artists on this album that are fixtures of WFUV's playlists. Sharon Van Etten, if you don't mind me just rolling off a couple of names here. Sharon Van Etten, Death Cab for Cutie, Tao, Jay Som, Stephen Merritt, who is part of the frontman of the Magnetic Fields, Flaming Lips are here, Japanese Breakfast, and there's some more. And the material that they cover is pretty wide-ranging, like Who Has Seen the Wind, we know is a B-side, Plastic Ono Band B-side, to Instant Karma. Stephen Merritt covers Listen, the Snow is Falling, the B-side, The Happy Christmas War is Over. Don't Be Scared gets covered, tune from Milk and Honey. You know, things like Born in a Prison from Sometime in New York City is done by US Girls. You know, so Dogtown, which was on I guess it was the first Yoko Ono tribute album, Every Man is a Woman. There was a version of Dogtown. There's a new version of Dogtown. So it's a very interesting collection. Benjamin Gibbard behind it, and it's a good album, really good album.
I can't wait to listen. I like hearing different arrangements of these songs, just like I love Beatle covers. You know, there you go. And that's all the news I have.
Okay.
Oh, no news.
Thank you, Ken. So as I had mentioned before the news, today we're going to be talking about The Beatles and India, the film that is showing now already on BritBox in America, and will be available for ordering soon, if not now, on Amazon and other places you might order DVDs and Blu-rays. We have with us Peter Compton, the director, co-director with Ajoy Bose of The Beatles and India. And, you know, we thought maybe first, before we talk to Peter, we will show you the trailer, which is quite nice.
Did you enjoy the trip over to India?
The journey was terrible, but the trip was all right. We had a nice holiday in India and came back rested.
When George and we got connected, it was like wildfire, you know.
Paul phoned George and said, there's this man called Maharishi who's going to come and talk about meditation. Maharishi was the most powerful, magnetically charismatic person I've ever met.
Their manager, their best friend, was now gone.
He was found in his second-floor bedroom just after 2 o'clock this afternoon.
For that moment in time, Maharishi replaced Brian.
The Beatles were coming to stay with the Maharishi. The whole world and its media is going to be here.
The huge crowd assembled here outside, looking the new face of the English people, like the big hairs and all that. It was a craze.
They had descended in our part of the country and they had embraced the spiritual narrative of India. We felt, look, they are one of us.
It was really some trip, the biggest trip I've ever had in my life, you know.
There was no pressure from the outside world. Their creative juices just overflowed.
They said there was a CIA camp in the ashram getting all these foreigners to destabilize India.
Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, a great spiritual leader or maybe a great charlatan and crook, depending on which side you're looking at him.
The happiest time of my life, one of the happiest times is in India. It was just such a groove. You know, it was such a pure thing.
So, Peter, you know, what I enjoyed, I think, most about this film is that I guess I came to it expecting it to be mostly about the Beatles in Rishikesh, but it actually is a lot more expansive than that. It goes back to the beginnings of George Harrison, in particular's interest in Indian music and Indian spirituality, running into the instruments on the help set, and how he pursued it after that, and also the effect that the Beatles had on India, which is something we never think about. You know, we always think about the Beatles going to Rishikesh. We never think about what Indian people made of the Beatles. What led you to take that approach?
Okay, so my co-director, Ajoy Bose, is a very established political journalist in India, and he wrote a book that Penguin published in 2018 called Across the Universe. And in that book, he'd spent about 3 years tracking down anyone connected with the Beatles in India, which was difficult in some cases, but in others fairly easy. They like George Harrison moved in all sorts of circles between the 70s, 80s and 90s and that. So we interviewed some like in millionaire industrialists where he had dinner with them quite regularly. Then we met someone where he approached George outside a hotel, and George used to come in for tea in the afternoons because he used to like the Indian tea concept. So Ajoy kind of joined all that together, and then we planned to shoot in 2019. Went out to the ashram, obviously, and then we went to all the places: Delhi, Mumbai, or Bombay as it was known then, and interviewed as many people as we could. So there's still some interviews that we couldn't shoehorn into the film, but in that process, we picked up, you know, people were giving us like photo albums with photos of the Beatles in it that hadn't been seen since they put them in the album, you know, in 1968. So that we knew there was a really good story to tell there, and your reaction's been the same with everyone that's, you know, connected with Beatle lore and that. They just like the whole concept of the film.
All those people that you interview, it gives us a whole slate of new people with Beatles involvement who haven't been interviewed before or seen before, or their names even generally being known.
Yeah.
I gather you sort of met with Ajoy and first began talking about this at the White Album Symposium at Monmouth University, where we all were too.
All right, okay. We would have been, yes, well, we would have, yeah. If only we'd known. I mean, Ajoy was kind of thrown in at the deep end there. He didn't know anyone there at all, and I knew about his book, so I just approached him there, and then he got much more sort of relaxed than that. So he did. I don't know if you went to his. He did a lecture on the book, in fact, when he was there. and talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so he was a rebel in his youth in India, and he was there at he was always around for the Beatles and that. You know, there was a lot of publications in India in I think in 67. There was a few newspapers that ran Beatles stories specifically for that market. But what's strange is that when the Beatles arrived there in 66, it was like Beatlemania completely. It was, you know, they were just troubled all the time, and that there was fans absolutely everywhere. And of course, we got that George interview that never been broadcast, never been listened to rather, since it was broadcast in 66, where the Beatle mask slips quite a bit in that, and he's quite stroppy about, you know, being hassled all the time by people. So it's sort of a very different thing. Right. But you'd be shocked if you saw Indian newspapers from that time. They run ads with like Beatle type figures in them. The detail in the reporting is absolutely phenomenal. It's like day by day. If anyone goes anywhere or leaves the hotel for 10 seconds, it's all covered all the time. They're being tracked all the time, and you can see that in the ashram as well. The amount of photographers and pressmen that are standing outside the ashram, you see, continuously in the archive footage. I love the fact that Mal Evans is sent out to talk to them. This is a guy who was a post office engineer, 5 years before, and he's facing the world's media in India. So it's quite a strange parallel.
Mm-hmm. So let's go to Ken, see what Ken has to ask, and then we'll come around again.
Okay, I think in some ways you may have partly answered this question, but I wanted to bring up the fact that I'm sure that you're aware that 2 years ago, there was another documentary that came out on the Beatles in India that Paul Saltzman did.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, Mark Lewison was interviewed for that documentary. He's in yours. It's always a joy to hear from Mark. What would you say, how would you differentiate the two documentaries?
Well, Paul's one, we were involved in that in early days now of that documentary, and we kind of went in different paths in the end because it became more of a personal thing for him, and we wanted to expand it and make it much more grounded in the actual story. I mean, his is a sort of limited story of how he got there and everything. So ours was more of expanded, was the aim we had. Luckily, Mark's a very good friend of mine, so it's good that he did both. He did both documentaries now. I mean, he always adds great, well, obviously being the doyen of Beatles writers, but he always adds great weight and factual information. I know he was amazed the first time when he went to the ashram. That kind of blew him away completely.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know Pete. Do you know Pete Schroeders, the Dutch?
Yes.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah. So Pete went with us. He's the guy that engineered all the then and nows in it, and he spent like 3 days there, like pacing up and down, pacing out, distance, everything. So I think there'll be a Ferrari soon with the most detailed map of the ashram. There's a map of the ashram in the DVD extras where we show where each place is. But he was vital for those then and now sections in the film, which where the film dissolves from 1968 into modern day. So he's well, if you know him well, he's on sun elevation and trees and that and things. He always uses trees to locate photos, which he did. He found, this is of interest, the famous group shot, the group shot of Maharishi and all the followers would be impossible to find nowadays, and he found it from a black and white photo that someone had, and the tree in the background gave away completely the location. And the location, I don't know if you know the current footage, there's lots of meditation pods, like little domes, and they weren't there in 1968. They were a 1970s edition, so you would get no sense of where that big space was for all those people to be in the picture, and he found it brilliantly. So it was great.
He is an incredible location guy, I mean,
yes. Oh, number one.
He sent me pictures of the Beatles saying, if you count 8 cobble steps to the left of his shoe, that's where the photographer was standing.
Yeah. He was disappointed when we were matching the shot of Paul and Ringo and the wives coming across that bridge. He knew that it would have been taken in the afternoon because of the sun elevation. It was like, I think it was 4:45. We had to do it in the morning. We only got permission to film in the morning, so I think he was quite disappointed. But I don't think, well, he noticed the difference. I don't know if anyone else would. So, but he is a perfectionist. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Can you say, sorry,
yeah,
can you say between the film footage and the photos, I'm going back and forth questioning, have I seen this before? Not really being sure. But how much has never actually been shown before?
Okay, so one bit is obviously well, it might not be too obvious, the John and George interview at Bangor, when they're all shaken up by Brian's death and that. We found someone that filmed that an 8mm from another angle, and we cut that into the film. So every time there's a flash gun that keeps going off, so we cut the color bits into it. But I think that's for real Beatles connoisseurs probably. Obviously the Leo McKern home movie, the Help home movie, which just disappeared once they were sold. It's just good it was good to find to make those were available, so we decided to go with them. And this 64 Bel Air meet and greet, August 64, the charity thing, Capitol Records and that. So I've never seen that in color at all. I found that in an archive, and there's a woman that filmed it, and she double exposed the film, so you get the Beatles and it keeps jumping out the frame. Then you get horses, someone riding a horse across it. It's quite strange. And there's other little bits as well, but those are the sort of main sections. It's always the first question.
Yeah,
no, it's always the first question when you're doing a Beatles film. The first question from anyone that's going to buy it, to screen it, and that is, has it got Beatles music? Answer no. And then the next question is always, what is there any new footage in it? So on this we could say yes, there is new footage. And not
one thing that I hadn't seen before, and forgive me if it was in Ajoy's book, but you had mentioned, and I didn't realize that after there was a birthday party for Patty Harrison, and after that the Beatles rehearsed and jammed on the roof of one of the bungalows there. And there's a couple of photos, one from John and one from George, that I hadn't seen before. Had that been made available before?
Yeah, I can't remember where we got those from. I know the ones you mean. It's a thing with photo archives as well. If it's the Beatles, there'll be there's a lot of photos that just never get seen because like lazy researchers and that, they'll just go in and they'll just choose. It's almost like a pile of photos, and they'll just choose the same old ones from the top. But I found some remarkable photos of the Beatles, just fantastic. Which we need to do another documentary to air them in, I think. Yeah, but there's a lot out there, definitely. I just want to find one that Mark hasn't seen. That's the challenge. I haven't succeeded yet.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So actually, the Beatles they did a rooftop performance before Apple. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. Well, when you go on that roof, it's a pretty magical place. I mean, you think what went on that roof, and the photos are fairly limited. A lot of the rooftop photos are taken at Maharishi's bungalow, because that was completely secluded. So no one else was sort of allowed on there. It's just the Beatles and wives, etc. So the ones that were taken on their roof, their bungalow roof, are a bit rarer. So there's Dennis O'Dell. There's quite a few in his book. When he went to visit them, he took quite a few photos on the roof. But the guy in the film, Nick Nugent, he was a student then, but he became a BBC Indian correspondent. So he really knew. He's very sort of factual on what he says and that. So it's just that he didn't know what they were actually if they were writing songs up there or not. Difficult to tell. But for him to get that magic pass in there, it was a bluff as well. That we don't explain that in the film, but he got in there because he went in as like an instrument carrier. So there's like 4 of them. They all carried one instrument each just to get into the compound. So it's a great one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned the movie Help, one of the things that I found interesting that I didn't know before was that people in India were offended by the way that the Indians in the film were portrayed, the stereotypes. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, no, that was new on me. Ajoy, that's very much from Ajoy, and I think it's really true. It's got every Indian cliche you can think of. Like the one I always love is the when one of the staff in the in the restaurant goes down to lie on a bed of nails. That's just such a, you know, to relax, to rest a bit. That's such a cliche. Just like, yeah, just the whole thing. I don't know. I mean, it's still good. It's not one of those films that's been suppressed and that, although it doesn't appear that on British television. It doesn't appear. Hard Day's Night is on much more than Elvis. I'm sure it wouldn't survive now. And as Ajoy said, you know, the goddess in it is very close to a real Indian goddess. So,
sure, Kaili.
Who knows? But that was a new angle on me, and I can quite understand it as well. I think he's probably right.
Yeah, it's interesting. You never stop to think how the people in India reacted to that.
Yeah.
So used to the rest of the world loving the Beatles and their whole persona and their sense of humor, and that kind of just goes right by them.
Yeah.
Did you take Help to be as being like that, the religion being centered in India? I took it as being some nondescript, unidentified place in the mysterious East. I didn't really think of it as India per se.
I think it's it's a lot of it is, I think, because they're turbaned as well. That's a very English viewpoint of India, and there's a few English character actors in it as well, who, like the guys outside the Indian restaurant, they're all done up as like Indians and they've got East End Cockney accents, you know. So you've got that sort of element to it. It's still a great film. I think it's in my top 10 of all time, definitely.
It's my favorite Beatle film, actually.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I had my head on. Yeah, I prefer it to Hard Days. I could watch it many times. I've always wondered if they divert from the script. I've been reliably told that is the script, so they're not. Although they're quite stoned at times, they are sticking to a script. So it is a really good script. Then. Fantastic.
Oh yeah, the cinematography was amazing.
Yeah,
in Help. You know,
yeah,
you can watch them on the skiing scene with Ticket to Ride every day of my life. Never get tired of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me pass you over to Darren.
All right. And Help turned, probably, at least for me, I maybe for all of us, turned us all onto curling for the first time. Anyway, Peter, I have to say that I'm amazed that after all of these decades, all this time has passed. When you thought you read it all, you saw it all, you know it all, that there are still stories to be told. And I think Peter Jackson's Get Back opened up so many windows to a world that we thought we knew for so many years, and we really didn't. And your entire team with the Beatles in India should be commended for opening up another world, this aspect of the Beatles and the connection to India, more than, as we said at the top of the show, more than just visiting with the Maharishi and sitars popping up in some of the songs. There's so much more there. So it was just what's the expression? A mouth-opening experience for me watching the film, seeing all of this, and having these different events in Beatle history connected, like Help. The Beatles discovering the sitar during the filming of Help, and George hooking up with Ravi Shankar, and then that period following the Beatles touring, 1966. We know that where John went off and filmed How I Won the War. We kind of knew about George going to India, but here we're really getting a vivid picture that George and Patty went there, and they were both totally enamored with the entire country, and I mean the influence that it had just from that trip in September of '66 is enormous. Again, things that you discover watching your film. You know, there was a moment early in the film that I thought was the first fascinating fact that I learned, that George Harrison's mother listened to Indian music.
Yeah.
This is in the early 1940s, I'm assuming, although it doesn't have to be when she was pregnant with George, but there is a statement made where George's mom listened to Indian music on the radio, and it helped calm her during her pregnancy. Of course, you're going to draw all kinds of lines. If they're talking about being pregnant with George, well, if you believe that, you know, your influence from when you're in the womb.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, you've pointed out another fascinating thing about specifically George Harrison in this film.
Yeah, this was there was a lot of Indian servicemen in Britain during World War II after about 1941. So this was a program on the BBC, and it was a special half-hour program Sunday mornings 10:30. It was music for Indian servicemen. I wanted to use some of that music in the film to illustrate that section, but it's quite unbearable to listen to. It would have killed that section stone dead. So it's very sort of deep, not classical Indian, but very strange Indian music, very alien to Western ears. But that story comes from his mother's sister, so who was interviewed. I can't remember who did the interview, but that's where it's from, and it's generally thought that happened. So we just thought it's most, how far back can we go with the Indian influence? So that you can't get much
further back than that.
Yeah. So that was a good one to kick off with, definitely.
There's also a mention of George making his trip to India several months before the Beatles did for the recording sessions that ended up being the Wonderwall music album and the backing track, or not the backing track, the backing track to The Inner Light. And you do touch on a little bit on the connection between the Indian musicians who played on the sessions and how George came into contact with some of them.
Yeah, I always think that every week you learn something new about the Beatles. I always do. So my learn of last week was that there's a Ravi Shankar biography that's come out, a definitive Shankar biography. So I've been reading it. He recorded Abbey Road 5 years before the Beatles. I never knew that at all. But even better, Bhaskar Menon, who went on to become chairman of Capitol Records and that, he started working at Abbey Road on that day for the Ravi Shankar session as like an apprentice at Abbey Road. So his link, so I'm getting there to Wonderwall, they only had a 2-track machine in Bombay, and Bhaskar Menon was EMI's representative in India at that time, and he was on the other side of India. And George says, no, I have to have a 4-track to record this. It has to be in stereo. So he had to load up a 4-track machine and travel across India by train to deliver the 4-track to H&B Studios. So it's quite amazing. And we did go inside the studios, but there was nothing there. We went up to the 4th floor. So the building's still there. It's still got the H&B concrete logos outside. And the security guard showed us loads of 78 H&B 78s, like in boxes everywhere. But there was no Beatles 78s, unfortunately. But it just wasn't worth filming the room. It's just completely gutted, filled with just a lot of old boxes and that. And it's now insurance offices. But George always complained, didn't he, about those sessions that you can hear the traffic in the background because it's not that well soundproofed and that.
Right.
And it's really true. You really can. It's in a really busy part of Mumbai or Bombay.
Through Paul Saltzman's presentations and his books and his stories about being with the Beatles in India, you get the impression that it was a very, very private event. But there's so much footage from cameramen who are inside with the Beatles as well. Or shed some light on who these, was it just media types, and this is footage that you gathered? I mean, who was doing all of this filming of the events of the Beatles at that time?
Yeah, a lot of the film, a lot of the color footage that we've got was taken. It was quite open to sort of journalists and that before the Beatles get there. So you see them building, getting the buildings together and that, and bricklaying scenes and that, and you get that reporter that walks around the ashram, and he went there in September '67. That's when the Beatles were due to go there, isn't it? And they had to delay it because of Epstein's death. So when he walks around and he shows the beds and everything, but footage inside, that's just sort of general stuff that we found. I mean, the real killer is obviously the Beatles have all got Bolex cameras, which was like, that was the state of the art camera at that time. And it was disappointing. Well, it disappointed me, not for anyone else in Get Back, when Paul has that sequence about India, when he shows his really artistic footage that he shot. So there wasn't much. Obviously, there's the Italian television footage, the black and white footage, which everyone's probably seen when they go down to the beach, etc. And they're all singing songs and that. And everything else I think's has come from some other source that's been around. And obviously, we couldn't use that. We're not going to be able to use the Apple material, but I've been told there's a lot more of that. There's a lot of Indian material because they filmed everything that moved basically when they were there.
That's fascinating. And the scenes down by I guess they were, was that at the Ganges?
Yeah, by the Ganges, yeah, down the hill, yeah.
Was what I had in mind, thinking, because if I had seen some of that footage, I didn't remember it.
Yeah.
This is fascinating that so much more was documented, was covered, was preserved of the Beatles' time there. And then you were alluding to this early on. There's that scene with, I think it was Mia Farrow at the shoreline.
Oh yeah, on the rock.
Into that exact spot today.
That's a classic bit of Pete Schroeder's, the man that finds the rock.
It looks exactly the same.
Yeah, it does. It is exactly the same. Yeah, we couldn't get to the bit where they sit on that black and white footage because the Ganges is like moved over a bit, so we couldn't get it. So a lot of people might have faked that and that, but Pete wouldn't have any of that. So that's it. So we kept it as it was. I think with the footage as well, that all this stuff only appeared later. I think I don't remember. I mean, I was 12 when all this happened. I don't remember any of it being on the news or anything like that. It's all come out much later than that. The only news item I can remember is that very British newsreel that we have, where it's the very chirpy British commentator about they've come to meet the Maharishi and that. It's all very jokey, the whole thing. It's got that great shot of John pretending to limp across. He's walking through the trees and he starts limping because he knows the cameras are watching him. It's great.
Allan, back to you.
Okay. I assume from what you've said in passing a couple of times, like not using Beatles music, not having access to the Beatles footage, that Apple did not cooperate in any way with this, or did they?
We've done a few films in the past. We did a film on Sgt. Pepper. The answer to that is no. You can do what you could write to them and say you're doing this film, but they don't want to know, which is understandable. I mean, that's the problem. I don't think they'd ever adopt a film in that. I don't even know if if I was sure that Dhani Harrison would be very keen to hear his father's interview in that. We've got the whole interview. It's about 12 minutes long.
Yeah.
But you just never know.
I'd have thought that given George's interest in this and Paddy's interest in keeping his artistry and everything else alive, that Paddy would have been a good ally in here for this. I think so. I don't know how much. She's still certainly in contact. And I mean, when we launched the film in November in Spain, the film company invited her out, so we had about 3 days with her. We did like lots of press and everything. So I don't know. I know she was at the Get Back premiere in London for her very brief appearance in Get Back, extremely brief appearance in Get Back. But I think some companies, a lot of people think, is Paul McCartney in it or is Ringo in it? No, that's not going to happen at all. You wouldn't even make the approach. It's all going to be. It's Apple, isn't it? So that's it. So yeah.
What more can I say?
To get back to a little bit of the beginning about the Beatles, the way they were received in India, one thing I found really kind of interesting is that everybody was talking about their harmonies. And when I wrote Ravi Shankar's obit for the Times, and when I was researching that, I found a long interview that Ravi's brother, I guess Uday Shankar, did with the Times magazine. And in it, he was talking actually very dismissively about Western music. And he was saying, basically in Indian music, it's melody and rhythm. Harmony, we don't care about. we like that to us is baby talk, you know?
Yeah, right.
And, and so it kind of struck me that the Beatles harmonies was one thing that several people mentioned as the thing that appealed to them.
Yeah, everything's delayed in India as well. Like that whole the Savages who we interview and that it's like the beat era comes to India like 68, sort of late era, 68, 69. So they're sort of formed in that period, but a lot of their sound is like British invasion to you or beat to us, you know. And then in the film we use there's an explosion of psychedelia in about 1972. You get 73 in India and Pakistan. You get all these records that all sound like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. They're all like backwards tapes. This is in like the early 70s. So it's a sort of slight delay throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is on the harmonies. Yeah, they do like it. We interviewed someone at a couple of other bands as well. So and same thing, but obviously we couldn't fit it all in the show.
Mm-hmm. And Darren referred to George and Patty's September 66 visit. But I think that the Beatles stopped over. Did they stop over on the way back from Japan and the Philippines?
That's right. Yeah, that's June 66. Yeah, when they go to those two music shops. Yeah.
And they were actually there for several days. It wasn't just a layover.
Yeah, people it's often quite as a layover, but they went out of Delhi. I know that because George took quite a few photos. They went to like villages and that. So I think that and that's what, you know, they saw the real India. They weren't in that hotel the whole period. And that. So it's always just
been unusual for them.
Yeah. It's usually just portrayed as them having instruments, you know, in the hotel. There's those pictures of them in the hotel rooms and that, with them being shown all the different instruments. But it's amazing that the shops are still there. I mean, it's just incredible. The Ricky Ram shop is a fantastic place because obviously he was making all the sitars for Shankar as well, the guy's father. Mm-hmm. And they're just amazing instruments, like ivory inlays and everything. I mean, he had a wealth of stories we could use. Like Peter Sellers did you know Peter Sellers was learning to play a sitar at that time? I never knew that. And there's pictures of him with guitar with sitars from Ricky Ram's shop. Incredible. I don't think, being Peter Sellers, he probably didn't stick it very long, but yeah, he was on board with that. And there's that film, The Guru. I don't know if you know that film with Michael York that came out, which is almost the story of George. Came out in '69. It's an American film filmed in India, and it's basically like, someone a pop star going to discover himself in India. And it's got lots of parallels. I think George visited the set amazingly in '69. There's a picture of him with Michael York and that posing with sitars together. Worth seeking out. I think it's on YouTube. It's well worth seeing. Definitely.
What's the title again?
It's called The Guru, I think. Don't mix it up with the other film that came out. There's a film recently called The Guru, but it is on there. Yeah, it's well worthwhile. It's Merchant Ivory's first film. Incredible. Yeah.
You talk a lot in the film, well, not a lot, but enough about the conflict between the Beatles wanting to do a film of Maharishi, and there was another company that also wanted to do a film, and Maharishi had said yes to both. And this upset the Beatles. And the implication in the film is that was a major reason they left.
Yeah.
Do you think it was the major reason?
Well, I think so. Yeah. Again, in the film, you see the George and Paul trip to Sweden. That was in November. I think it's November '67. So they go there to cool off the Maharishi. So he's I think they got word about a film being made, and that's they fly out there. And do that great interview with the Swedish guy with the flowers and everything, and it is just to cool off the Maharishi. So I think when it resurfaces again, in that later period in the ashram, I think that's a kind of clincher, and that's with 4-star, I think. Yeah. So I think while John and George were there, I think there were some executives that arrived when they were there in those dying days, those sort of desperate last few weeks when they looked really washed out all the time and that. They look nothing like they did when they arrived there in February.
So for me, the interesting thing is, like, what contributed more towards them leaving? Their irritation at Maharishi dealing with both them and Four Star Film on the film project, or the dreaded Magic Alex, famous charlatan, coming by and working out this deal with another one of the people taking the course to go to the Maharishis and scream and all that, that at least seemed to be the immediate cause of them leaving. But do you feel that that's overstated by people like me?
No, I think Magic Alex, what's very disappointing is we actually, there's no photos of Magic Alex in the ashram. And we tracked down this guy, he had footage of Magic Alex in the ashram, very brief, but it is him with Patty in there on a boat, probably in about the last week of March, I think. And we couldn't get a deal with him to show it. And he looks quite sinister there. I mean, he's with all the women. In fact, there's no other Beatles on this boat. So I think I'm more in the Magic Alex camp. I think, he's the originator. And having you spoken to Patty about it as well. I mean, it kind of passed her by. She was getting his hearsay as well. So, but if you probably had Susan Shumsky on as well. I mean, she's got pretty insider knowledge of Maharishi and the women at that time. And as it says in the film, he liked to be photographed with the good-looking girls in there, and that we had that photo, I think, in the film, which underlines that the less good-looking girls are in the back, and he's surrounded by the good ones. So,
okay.
So I've no idea. There needs to be a Maharishi documentary, absolutely no doubt about that. So, I mean, I was shocked to find that that advert for his, touring America, doing things at Howard. It was at Howard Johnson's, and you saw that in the film. There's a little ad for Maharishi here tonight, and he promises levitation and all in a Howard Johnson somewhere in the Midwest. So I don't know.
Okay, Ken.
All right, since you mentioned the Savages, this is going to be an odd question. I hope you can clarify this for me, because there's an interview in there with Carl Douglas. Now, this is the Carl Douglas who did Kung Fu Fighting?
No, this is the interview is with Biddu, who was the producer of that record.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I had it confused.
Yeah, no, that's Biddu. So he became well, as you see in the film, he headed west while the Beatles were heading east. And what the great story with Biddu is that the opening of the film, that song at the beginning of the film, is Biddu's first recording. He arrived in London in late '67, I think, got a publishing deal. Then he went into a studio and recorded that song. Now, the amazing thing about that song is playing on that song it's Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones are on that, obviously sessionmen at the time. John McLaughlin is playing guitar on that, and Nicky Hopkins as well, and it's produced by Tony Visconti. So you couldn't get a better start, really, in life. Wow. So, yeah, incredible. And it's a great song as well. I mean, we couldn't really hide, we couldn't put on the screen who's playing on this, etc. So, but it's his story is great as well. Fantastic.
Okay, there's a couple of quotes I want to bring up here that I found interesting, and they're very, some of them are fairly simple, but they're kind of powerful. George Harrison saying Indian music has more freedom than jazz, which I found to be really interesting. And I don't know, can you enlighten us, since we've all listened to Indian music, but I haven't studied it myself, how much of Indian music is really structured and disciplined, and how much of it is improvised? Would you be able to clear that up?
Ajoy would be the man to tell you that, I think, definitely.
Okay.
I never know about, it's so difficult with Indian music. You have to go by, is it Monterey Pop, when Ravi's tuning up and people start applauding.
It's a concert from Bangladesh.
Yeah,
right.
Bangladesh, you have to make that announcement. Yeah, I'm only tuning up.
No.
So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that one.
Okay. Also, the Maharishi, in observing the Beatles, said that George was the most advanced of the Beatles, and that this was his last life. And I found that interesting that he picked that up on George. Obviously, George was so into learning about Indian music and Indian culture, but just to think, if you're following the whole theory of, having many lives, coming back from, from past lives and everything, that George was the closest to, I guess, reaching God, and that, the Maharishi observed that.
Yeah, I think it's the like the connection with Ravi. I mean, that's as someone says in the film, it is the most incredible connection that's so different. I mean, George, I think he was an apprentice electrician, wasn't he? And Ravi Shankar was like international renowned Indian music player and that, and they meet and instantly click and become the greatest friends ever. And that it's just an amazing part of the story, most definitely.
How do you explain that? I mean, there's one interview where George is saying that in some ways he's like a father to Ravi.
Yeah. Yeah. It's difficult. I mean, Shankar Angadi, the Asian Music Circle, the one that was there at the introduction, the dinner and that, he doesn't say it in the film, but he did tell us that they were shocked at how it was like they were old friends almost straight away. So perhaps the reincarnation story, perhaps they met in a previous incarnation. So who knows? But throughout the film, if you see them together, they're so at ease with each other. Like on the Cavett show, when Dick Cavett makes that joke and that, and George defends him straight away, like almost like a son with a father in that. He won't tolerate any sort of gags or anything like that about Ravi. So it's great, and Ravi always appears as the total gentleman, completely.
In bringing out this whole story of how Indian music is being heard by Western culture, and I found it really interesting that you found a clip of Keith Relf interviewing Ravi Shankar. And where did that come from exactly?
That was a pop show on the BBC from '66. As you probably know, that the BBC specialised in wiping all their videotapes to use them all again. And luckily, someone kept that one. There's a lot of stuff that's turning up now where producers or directors kept their own copy of it. So that's one that turned up just a couple of years back. But that was a whole series. I think there's one with Townsend as well. Townsend interviewed, Stroppy Townsend interview. But there's probably about 40 of those shows, and that's all that exists, just that one, which is a real shame.
Really? You mentioned Susan Shumsky,
Yeah,
and she did say that the Maharishi influenced the Beatles' music. And obviously, you're going to go with the George Harrison songs like Within You, Without You, and Love You Too, and The Inner Light. But she also mentioned, and it's pretty obvious with Across the Universe, with using Jai Guru Dev in there, but she also gave credit to songs like Hello Goodbye and I Am the Walrus. I mean, do you agree that that was influenced by
I think so.
Maharishi?
They've got that like incantation sound on it, where the phrases are just repeated all the time. So I can see where that comes from, definitely. But she says that if you spent day to day with Maharishi, she did, you can understand all his intonations and that as well. So they kind of took some inspiration from the way he spoke as well. That sort of the gentleness that he has.
Interesting.
So I think there's elements there, definitely.
Yeah, it helps you to listen to these songs in a different way, because part of me, when I hear Hello Goodbye, I just think it's pure pop to me.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the Hey La Hey Hello, it's Hawaiian, but I think there could be a connection there, definitely.
Right. Okay. Let's go back to Darren.
Alrighty. I wanted to ask you about the ashram today. What I really enjoyed about the film, and Ken and Allan can attest to this because I always talk about things like this. I find it so fascinating to be able to go back to a site where something, it doesn't even have to be, a site where something significant took place, and to see it today and to go, oh, he stood there, this happened there. We got that sort of with the Get Back film, where we really got a lot of attention on the physical roof, and this, you got to see how things were laid out and where things were recorded that we'd been hearing on album for 50 some odd years. Here in your film, you actually take us to the ashram today. It's no secret that it's fallen into ruins over the years, and was, I think, supposed to be demolished at one point. That's what I think I had heard, but they didn't, clearly.
Yeah, it's, well, the irony is that, yeah, if you're going to go on Beatle history in the UK, like the theatres they played at and buildings they were connected with, a lot of them are just disappearing faster than that. Yeah, in India, a place that was like knocked up overnight, like almost like a jerry-built place, literally, is still standing. That for me, that's the incredible thing. And a lot of this is down to the park ranger who's interviewed there. It was completely overgrown. The jungle had like reclaimed everything, overgrown. Him and a team of assistants, they spent about 5 years cutting all the vegetation back completely. And there's a local journalist who got the local council there to start making it a tourist destination. And that. So it's very out of the way. I mean, it's 6 hours from Delhi by train. And when we filmed there, the whole time we spent filming there, about a week probably, there was hardly anyone there at all. It was uninterrupted. There's a few Americans there turned up in that, like real fanatical Beatles fans, but little else. It's more expensive for Westerners to enter. Indians go in at a special rate and that. But I think that there's just nothing much there at all. They've just got a sign outside all the places, but they don't show films. It's not like a sort of modern day attraction you get, to entice people to come. But I suppose that's the magic of it, really. That it's all there. You can walk up those steps onto the roof of the bungalow. That's, for me, that's just fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And people get confused by Maharishi added a lot onto it in the 70s. He built a massive hotel, which is still there, derelict hotel. And as I said, the meditation pods, which appear, if anyone talks about the ashram now or film on YouTube, all you see is those incredible pods on top of the hotel and that, with all the graffiti designs. But I was determined not to film any graffiti there at all. I just think that destroys it, all those Sgt. Pepper paintings and all that sort of thing. I just wanted to see what it looked like originally. But it was completely looted. Yeah, once Maharishi went, his lease ran out, so he had to leave. And everything was looted, everything was taken, like the baths, all the fittings, etc. But there's still little bits left in there. There's still a toilet here and there, original toilet in different places. And the Maharishi's bungalow was the most luxurious, and I think it's had air conditioning, and it's got a basement and everything. That was the sort of the place. So the Beatles was quite Spartan, really.
And all of each of the 4 Beatles individual bungalows still stands.
Yeah, it's very much like Help. They probably all went in through all through the 4 doors next to each other and that. So you've got Help recreated, when they're in the high street, in the terraced houses, when they all go into the same. Well, they don't go into the same room there. But yeah, so it's great, and it's good to the park ranger, with who was it who came out there? Prudence Farrow visited the first time a month before we got there, and she took him around the entire site, and she obviously remembered everything. She pointed out that for the very first time, Mark was very delighted to find this out. She located each room of the block and that, so where everyone was. For the first time ever, we know who was in each bit. So that was great. So again, Pete Schroeders will definitely be putting that in his mapping. Definitely. So we'll see that soon. I'm looking forward to see all that, because it's never been scrutinized, that whole site. So it's just it's a fascinating place to go. And if you can get there, believe me, it's worth going to.
Well, if there are any adventurous Beatle fans watching who want to look into making a trek like that, where does one turn?
Yeah, you can get the train, which is an experience and a half, but you can fly there now. So we flew there the second time. You can fly from Delhi. It's not that long. It's about an hour-long flight, something like that. And there's an airport now at Dehradun, which is the main town north of the ashram. And that George wrote the song about it. Dehradun, yeah. So that would be the way to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you would get. You can probably get a guide there as well, I would imagine, something like that. But yeah, it's it's definitely a place to tick off the bucket list absolutely without a doubt. If you're a Beatles fan, you'll get the full force of it when you go there. And of course, the Ganges is still flowing past that, so it's exactly how they would have heard that beautiful rush, gushing sound of the Ganges. It's fantastic. I'm sounding like the Indian tourist board now, but yeah.
This I'm not sure how much of the music you were involved in, but there's we talked briefly about the fact there's no Beatles music in here.
Yeah.
But I have here, and I also have to compliment the album.
Yeah.
Because it's a double album, and you get what essentially is the soundtrack, the score.
Yeah.
One disc, but you get on the first disc a complete redo by some of today's top Indian musicians.
Yes.
Of the Beatles songs, mostly from that period, from '68. There's a couple of exceptions here and there, and it's almost excuse me. It is a necessary part of the whole experience if you get to see the film, to make sure you have this as well. My copy, I'll say it again, my copy's printed backwards, although you say it's forwards though, right?
It appears forwards. Yeah.
Okay, good.
For me,
mine are all backwards messages on mine, haha. But tell us a little bit about the score and who wrote the music and did all of the score for the film.
Okay, so the score, it carries on the Beatles tradition, because it was done. We did it at Abbey Road Studio 2. It was recorded there, and the Indian elements were recorded in India. So we did it at Abbey Road Studio 2, which was an experience and a half as well. That was fantastic. And it's a guy called Benji Merrison who watched the film and he brought in all those sort of elements to the film. We didn't want to overdo it with overladen with tablas and all that sort of thing. So he created a more subtle approach to the whole thing. And I think it blends really well. I think it captures everything. There's a bit of George Harrison style guitar playing on it. And the other part of the album, the songs inspired by those Indian musicians. I mean, they appear at the end of the film. A lot of them, talking about how Beatle music lives on for them and how they discovered it. And they were just given free rein, really. We just let them get on with it. We told them the song we'd like them to do, and they just went away and did it. So, I mean, it's great to have Anushka Shankar doing Inner Light, because she fantastic embellishments and that. And there's I think it's a really listenable album. It's just very
much.
It is.
Yeah, very different. It's just completely.
And the treat is that, I mean, the final track on the soundtrack,
India.
India, which is the John Lennon song that, it has since been released, but is a quote unquote unreleased Lennon composition that we get here, and we hear Child of Nature, which became Jealous Sky, just two of the treats on this album. If I put you on the spot and I say there was something that you learned that you didn't anticipate stumbling into when making this film, what would that one oh my moment for you be? Something you didn't expect to learn or find out about, or, well, of course, if you expected to find out about it, that doesn't make sense. Something that you that was a surprise to you in this film, that was that one moment that made it all worth it for you.
For me, I think it was the I mentioned before about George enjoying going for afternoon tea in the hotel, and for me it's been reinforced by Get Back. There's no delusions of grandeur. They're just open with ordinary people all the time. Like in Get Back, the tea lady gets welcomed and Mal Evans helps along with the lyrics, and McCartney sort of goes along with it. So I think it's the same with India. Everyone we spoke to is the total niceness of them, and that they interacted with absolutely everybody, and I think that's something that's obviously missing from today's music world. That would never happen. But I think that it was always I always thought that was the final bit of bonding of the Beatles and that, the four of them together. But that's been killed off now by seeing Get Back, because there's so many moments in that where they're hugging each other and that. So it's that sort of world. I think we've illustrated it sort of fairly well in the film in that. Just the whole pleasantry of them, of being around them. Especially the woman that walks around the derelict buildings and that, and she says about how, about giving them food and so forth. They're really respectful. And Ajit Singh, the guy that organised the instruments and that at the different parties, when they're calling him sir all the time, and he says, "You don't have to call me sir." They're just beholden to him, and that when he plays Within You Without You, and George gives him the thumbs up. I mean, that's just such a lovely moment. Fantastic. So that for me, yeah, that's it. Right across the social classes of India, completely.
The film ends with, of course, the nasty, controversial ending of the Beatles' stay in India.
Yeah.
But almost as if it has a happy ending, we find out that each Beatle individually kind of buried the hatchet with the Maharishi, and ultimately it has a nice, sweet ending. The story that the Beatles ultimately did enjoy the stay, came away with positivity, and it wasn't, a bitter breakup and stayed that way forever.
Yeah, that's true. I think the McCartney interview is revealing on Charlie Rose. Yeah, that he takes his daughter along to see. He wants to show that he wants to introduce them to Maharishi, and that I think that's really relevant. I mean, he talks for quite a bit on that interview. Only used a small section of it, but he went into real detail about the meeting. So they were they're very close. I mean, you see the Apple press conference, and they're quite bitter. They're both John and George John and Paul are very bitter at that conference. It's like the whole of, it's like the destruction of Beatlemania. They're not Mr. Nice Guy with the press anymore. That's compare. If you see the '66 press conferences, it's the usual, inane questions, etc. But then they're quite vicious, aren't they, with the journalists? They don't take anything from them, right, at all. So yeah, I would say kindness, yeah, and niceness. That's a good definition.
Okay. Back to the starting point.
Yeah.
We should wrap up, but we should talk first about the DVD, and I assume Blu-ray too, home release. What other things besides Pete Schroeder's map?
There's the Pete Schroeder's map on it, and there's a good photo selection of the shoot, and an interview with Ajoy in that, who would be here doing the interview, but he's back in Delhi, so he couldn't do it. So you do get about 35 minutes, and he goes into more detailed background on how he got the book together and everything. When something we didn't touch on, the whole KGB thing, the Besmanov thing, how he yeah, I mean, no one who knew about that as well. So all that he uncovered as well. So, but that's another story.
Should we just say a few words about that for viewers, or have them just watch the film?
Yeah, sure. Well, I can mention it briefly. Yeah, so it was in Parliament that came up that, first of all, it's supposed to be the CIA that were infiltrating into India. And then I think at that time, Indira Gandhi had met with the Russian premier. That's in the film, isn't it? He's on a sort of tour of India. And then it reverses. It's the KGB are there after that, and Besmanov is looking to use Western stars and that to influence influencers being the word that's used today, but in the opposite direction. So that's quite an intriguing section of the film. Definitely, it was all new to me, so I didn't know anything about that.
The KGB guy calls Maharishi a charlatan and doesn't get sued by the Maharishi for that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. He doesn't do that. Yeah. Yeah, that was hard to find that footage. I've forgotten who we got that from. It was some sort of right wing. I can't remember who it is now. It was some organization. Couldn't believe it when we found that. So it's just great. So
that was interesting. There were so many interesting things in this film. Anything else to mention about the DVD release or Blu-ray?
No, that's it really. The only capper I can give you is that a couple of people have died that we interviewed. So we would never have. Their story would never have been told if we hadn't got to them. So I think we've done a sort of service there. Especially the helicopter pilot. He was. When I interviewed him, he was 96, so he died about 6 months ago. I mean, finding him, I think, is one of the great achievements of the film. Again, that's Ajoy Bose who tracked him down. I mean, his story is just great. Although he he doesn't tell you about the meaning of life story, that's kind of ruined, because he told me that you in a plexiglass dome in a helicopter like that, you can't have a conversation with anyone. It's impossible. Right. So yeah, so that kind of squashed that one completely. So I think that's it. So.
Okay. Can I ask just a couple questions? Last questions here. I noticed that you had the voice of Nancy Cook de Herrera in the film.
Yeah.
And she was the mother of Richard Cook, for whom Bungalow Bill was written about. She was the one who advised to shoot the tiger.
Yeah.
It was the tiger or us. And it says
right.
underneath her name, it says Maharishi publicist.
Yeah.
She actually went to work for the Maharishi.
I think she did. Yeah, she has written a book, or she did write a book. She's not with us now, but yeah, and that's I'd always queried what we're gonna define her as, and that was the definition that was given in the book, I think, as far as I remember. And she was like she organized everything. You know, when I think she met him in America for the first time, and she organized everything for him. She appears a lot in the film. I mean, she's in the background in a lot of scenes, so she's kind of always there, like overseeing everything.
Interesting thing about her, I got to know her slightly through correspondence, because the very day that Magic Alice sued us, I got a letter from her saying, "I'm so glad you finally said that it was Magic Alex's fault that the Beatles left India." And she was scathing about Mia Farrow, who had also said that Maharishi made a pass at her. And subsequently, when our lawyers went to interview Mia Farrow, she said, "You know, I think I might have been mistaken about that."
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. She reversed. Yeah. She reversed it, didn't she? Yeah. Yeah.
But Nancy remained involved with the Maharishi obviously died eventually, but she remained involved with the Transcendental Meditation Foundation, or whatever it was called, really for a lot of her life beyond that. And, stayed active really pretty much till she died.
Yeah, Susan Shumsky told me that a lot of people that appear in the film in the background of Maharishi were real long-term people with him. So there's people that appear throughout the film. There's someone behind Maharishi. It'll be someone that was very long-term with the organization. Yeah.
She said that she was basically the liaison between Maharishi and his famous guests, which would have been not just the Beatles, but the Beach Boys and some of them. And that was how she described her job to me. But it could have been, who knows? It was probably really more generally publicist is a good way to put it. But
yeah, we used to her daughter. We got quite a few pictures from her daughter and that are in the film that I've never seen before at all of the Beatles and that she took. She's quite often cropped out. There's a group photo of, I think, of like 6 or 7 of them, and they keep changing places. Donovan appears and that, and there's one with her in which we put in the film. That's another element of the film. All these photos that that you've just never seen anywhere. Just fantastic to get them.
Her granddaughter Sasha Cook is a pretty well-known opera singer.
Oh right, okay. Yeah. And Bill lives in the son lives in Hawaii, doesn't he? I think he's a conservationist now, as far as I know. He's definitely not a big game hunter.
Yeah. In the Paul Saltzman documentary, there's a Q&A that follows, and it's revealed that Richard Cook's father actually kept the relationship with George Harrison, and he helped to build his home in Hawaii.
Oh right. Oh wow. Oh, is it? Yeah. Gosh.
So the Cook family, in a number of ways, continued in some way with George Harrison, and part of the Beatles story here.
Yeah.
So George didn't object to the tiger shooting that much.
I guess not.
I think if we kept this discussion going a little longer, we'll find a way that the 4 of us are somehow linked. It's remarkable how a lot of the story that comes out of this film and subplots or sub stories all sort of link the Beatles to not only the country India, but all these other little these people who played even marginal roles. Somehow people are getting kind of connected and linked
Yeah, very much so. For me, the Beatles story is like biblical. It really is. It's just incredible. You know, how things can go terribly wrong and then something else happens in that. So I think that's why Get Back's such a revelation to get such a chunk in that. And it's great they took, well, you get Ringo does say he didn't like India. So that was a good bit of revelation. We all know that he didn't like India, but to hear him say it is quite cool. And it shocks me as well that that's only 8 months down the line from being in India. That it's another world completely. Just incredible.
One last question. I'm sorry.
Did Ringo really eat a suitcase worth of beans?
I think so, because Dennis O'Dell inherited his room, didn't he? And it was just a suitcase. The boxes of beans were still in the. He says it in his book. The boxes of beans were still in the room, so he didn't consume that many. I mean, even going to Rishikesh, when you go there now, there's obviously no alcohol, but there's no meat. You can't have no dairy products at all. So
I thought you were going to say there's still empty cans of beans laying around.
Yeah, there could be.
Actually, you could connect the fact that Ringo ate a lot of beans in India with the scene in Get Back.
Oh yes, yeah, the party thing. Yeah, that's true.
Martin that he farted.
Yeah.
Probably a carryover if you ate all that many beans that 8 months later.
Yeah, most
still.
Yeah. Ken had the last question.
Well, I don't know if I can follow that, but even though you sort of answered this question, I'd like to know the everlasting impact of what happened here in India on the other Beatles. I know with George, he absorbed it so much. He loved learning about the music, the culture, the philosophy, all of that. Was it mainly just learning about meditation and going through that experience? Is that the most they got out of it? And I know that certainly in the case of Paul, he's used Indian instruments on his solo music when he felt it was necessary. But what was the impact that this experience had for the most part on the other Beatles besides George?
Well, I think we got the John quote in the film from the Keele University interview where he says, that India was the greatest experience ever, which kind of underlines it. I think, and as far as I know, I think he wrote, I think India is a 1980 demo. I might be wrong, but I think it's a 1980 demo. So he's still reflecting on India then. Ringo is obviously involved with David Lynch and that foundation with Paul, so he's still got that connection. And then obviously Paul had that meeting with the Maharishi now, and I think I'm sure somewhere there's a song he does called India in his sound checks, apparently. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, and I don't know what it sounds like, so I've no idea. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's all. I think it's pretty much all four. Yeah, definitely. And Ringo does say you would think be the weakest link, but he does say, we've got that quote from him in that press conference where he says about he still meditates and that, and it's good, yeah.
Okay, well, there is an awful lot of really illuminating stuff in this film. If you haven't caught it yet, I recommend it. It's on BritBox and streaming, and will be out soon on DVD and Blu-ray. And Peter, thanks so much for coming and talking to us. It's been great.
Thank you for the great questions as well. Very good questions.
Okay, so that was a great chat with Pete Compton, I thought. We'll go around and give our contact information, starting with Ken.
Okay, if you would like to get in contact with me directly, my email address is everylittlething@att.net. On my YouTube channel, which is called Ken Michaels Radio, I just did a really interesting show. It's kind of, I mentioned this in this particular show that I did with the two guys from Two Legs, Tom Hunyadi and Andy Nichols. We did a show on what we felt has been Paul McCartney's creative peak in his entire career. And, one of the most watched of my videos is the one that I did with you, Allan, kind of a similar thing. What you thought the Beatles as a band, their creative peak was. And great thing about a topic like that is, you can do it many times with different guests and get lots of different answers. And for someone like Paul, for me, that's not an easy answer to give. You
Right.
know, you're dealing with someone who's been one of the most prolific writers of all time, and his catalog is massive, you know, and for some people it might be obvious his best years were in the Beatles. You know, for some people it's his Wings days. Some people might think he was more creative on his own after Wings. Some people think he's on a great ride right now. The last several albums that he's made, a lot of people think are great. So everybody's got different opinions, and I thought that I would ask the two guys who do a solo Paul McCartney podcast to chime in on that particular topic. And that is my latest video on Ken Michaels Radio. If you can, please subscribe to that. Also, there's my website, kenmichaelsradio.com, where there's weekly Beatles trivia every single week, where you can win one of 10 prizes, and lots of great interviews that I did in the past. And those are strictly audio interviews. And don't forget, I do have a weekly Beatles show that is in syndication called Every Little Thing, which airs on roughly 50 radio stations. It's not a show you can hear on demand. You have to listen to individual radio stations when they air it live. And you can find a page for Every Little Thing with a listing of all the radio stations, when they air it, links to their websites so you can stream them. And just look for the page Every Little Thing at my website, Ken Michaels Radio. And I think that's it.
Darren.
All right. Well, I'm at WFUV, and we're 90.7 FM in the New York City metro area. You can stream WFUV at our website, WFUV.org, and we have an app. You can also ask your smart speaker, if you have one, to play WFUV. The app is easy to find. Download it, and it's a handy way to be able to listen to the station. I can be heard Monday through Thursday nights, starting at 10 p.m. and Saturday afternoons from 1 until 4. And this coming Saturday is actually the day that marks my 38th anniversary on the air, on the radio / on WFUV, where it's all just about, not everything, but most of it's happened for me on the radio at WFUV. And it was 38 years ago, February 26th, 1984. 6 in the morning on a Sunday morning, I did my first show. And the first song I ever played, Venus and Mars from Wings.
Very cool.
Inter-rock show. But anyway, so I'm on the air 10 p.m. Monday through Thursday nights, 1 to 4 p.m. Saturday afternoons on WFUV. Shoot me an email at Darren DeVivo at WFUV.org, or go to Facebook. I have 2 pages. Find one of them, get in touch, and we'll be connected.
What, for your anniversary, we should have a party.
Yeah.
Maybe perform on top of a bungalow.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't have anything planned, but maybe the next show we do, I'll wear a little party hat.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
We may hold you to it. Okay, so for me, easiest way to get to me is on Facebook, and I've got 2.5 pages. There's just plain old Allan Kozinn. There is Allan Kozinn Remixed, and there is a McCartney Legacy Facebook page. Adrian Sinclair, my co-author, does most of that and regularly puts up interesting articles and pictures and things that we've run into in the course of our research, and any news about the book as well would get posted there. You can contact the 3 of us at Things We Said Today Radio Show at gmail.com. Say it again because it's so ridiculously long. Things We Said Today Radio Show, one word, at gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Things We Said Fab. And as a show, we also have 2 Facebook pages, soon to be more maybe, and then to be less. There is the plain old Things We Said Today page, and there is the Things We Said Today Beatles radio fans page. We hope you're watching this on YouTube. That way you can have gotten to see the trailer for the film that we just talked about, and all sorts of other atmospheric stuff. But we also have an audio version, which is on Podbean and iTunes, and various other places carry it too. And if you follow us on any of those and feel like subscribing to our channels on those services, that would be great. We'd love it. And so that's that. For Ken Michaels and Darren DeVivo, I'm Allan Kozinn saying thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.